So for those of you who haven't met me yet, I am Melissa Harlow, and I am the Director of Marketing here at MD2B Connect. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight for our webinar series, Residency Real Talk with Dr. Samir Desai. We're really happy to have you guys here tonight, and we're going to be going over some topics about the personal statement and the questions that you were able to submit in the Google form. And we may try and answer some questions, but we did get a lot of questions on the Google form, so we probably won't. And we may not be able to get all of your questions tonight. So if we don't, please feel free to reach out to any of us at our team. Even if it's just for guidance or anything that you may need, you're more than welcome to reach out to any one of us on our team, especially Dr. Desai. We want to see you guys succeed, and we want to help you as best we can. So please just know that our team is here at your disposal for anything that you may need and any questions that you may have. So throughout the webinar, you might see me sharing some links regarding certain topics that you can use for later. So please feel free to save those links and use them for later about certain topics that we're going to be discussing. And I think that's it. So with that said, I will go ahead and pass it over to you, Dr. Desai.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Alyssa, and welcome to all of you. We're excited to have you here with us on this webinar. Happy July to all of you. It is July 2nd. We're just a few days away from July 4th, the 4th of July here in the US, Independence Day. So happy 4th of July in advance. I hope you all have a little bit of time to enjoy yourselves and maybe see, if you're here in the US, a little bit of fireworks. So July also means that there's a lot going on, and we're going to be talking about some of the important things to do here in the month of July to get yourselves ready for September. Of course, September means we're going to be applying soon. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to focus quite a bit of time in today's webinar on the personal statement. I know that is a topic that is weighing heavily on many of your minds. I know on these one-on-one calls that I've been having with many of you, the topic of personal statements is coming up. It's causing some stress, quite a bit of anxiety. So hopefully today I can help relieve some of that. I wanted to remind you before we get into it that we have a lot of resources to help you stay on track, to help you get the information you need to make good decisions along the way, and to help relieve that stress and anxiety that typically accompanies this time of the year. So that includes such resources as our book, The Successful Match. Some of you have already received this book in the mail. Those of you who have recently started rotations with us, you're going to be getting several books. One is called Success on the Wards, which will help you unlock the full learning value of your rotations and perform to the best of your abilities. And then the red book, The Successful Match, which is 650 plus pages of detailed information on just about everything you want to know about matching successfully into residency. That book has an extensive chapter on the personal statement. So that's one resource you can use to help you get ready for your personal statement. And it also has a lot of other information that I'm sure that I'll be able to refer you to as we move through some of the questions that you have submitted. Additional resources that you may not be aware of include our blogs at both MD2B Connect, which you all are familiar with, and then our blog on our sister website, thesuccessfulmatch.com. There you're going to see a lot of blog posts that complement the content that is present in the books that you will be receiving or have already received. Those blog posts are very, very high yield. They go beyond the standard advice that people often hear, whether it's about letters of recommendation, personal statements, or preparing for interviews. So I would encourage all of you to go to thesuccessfulmatch.com, go to the upper right, click on the blog. In the blog search engine, put in whatever you're looking for, personal statement, residency interview. Just take a quick look at some of the articles so that you are aware of what's out there and how it can help you as you move through this summer. In addition, on our websites, we have a podcast called Success in Medicine, and there are episodes that we have devoted to certain aspects of the residency selection process, including the personal statement. There's an episode that is chock full of information for example, about how you may want to consider writing some program-specific personal statements. So there's a lot out there on our websites, our books, our blogs, our podcasts. And then, of course, there's a lot on one-on-one assistance that we can provide you. I have reached out to many of you already to get to know you, to review your path to this point, to understand your goals, and to talk about how we can achieve your goals. And for those of you who are new rotators, you and I will be speaking very soon, and we'll be able to dive deep into your particular situation. So do think about some of the things that you would like to discuss with me so we can make our conversation as productive as possible. So without further ado, let us get into today's topic. So let me share my screen. Give me a second here.
So while you're setting that up, just however you guys are doing tonight, hope you guys are having a good night and a good week so far. Yeah, obviously, if you're in the US for your rotations, you are going to be here for the 4th of July. So hopefully you'll get to celebrate that a little bit and see some fireworks and some things. So just wanted to give you guys a welcome if you are here rotating.
Hey, thank you, Alyssa. Alyssa, do you see my screen?
All right. So I can see your screen, Dr. Desai. Will you go ahead and start to present, and I'll let you know that everything's all good?
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get started. So we are here in July 2024. What are the key things that you want to be working on?
Dr. Desai?
Yes.
Hey, it looks like you're not in the presenter mode, at least on my side. If you guys could let us know in the chat if you're also seeing the same problem.
When you say that I'm not in presenter mode, what is it that you're seeing?
Yeah, so if you just click on in the top right-hand corner from beginning, it should play it as a slideshow. Instead, right now we're just seeing the screen with the preview of all the other slides.
You're not seeing anything advancing on your slide.
That's correct.
Okay. Let me see if I can fix that. Give me a second.
Okay. No problem. It wouldn't be the 21st century without having some technical difficulties, so no worries there at all.
Are you able to see my screen now?
Yes, looks like you got it. If you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide.
Okay, do you see the next slide?
Yep, looks like you're good. If you guys could let us know in the chat if it's working for you. It's working on my end, so just let us know. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. So let's get into it now. So July 2024, what should we be working on? So if you've heard me talk before, you know that I'm a proponent of researching programs. I'm a big believer in diving deep into the different programs. If you can do this, it will give you such an advantage in so many different ways. Now, the biggest challenge that we all have when researching programs is the sheer number of programs that are out there. Of course, this does depend on what specialty you're going after, but if you're going after internal medicine, for example, you know, there are over 500, 600 programs out there. So it's a lot of work to research programs. So what I always recommend everybody do is to break it up into small pieces. Anything that's a big task I found in my life, I get done when I break it up into small pieces. So if you can take a little bit of time every day, I know you're all busy, but just a little bit of time every day, 30 minutes to an hour, to carve out for researching programs, you will get through a good number of programs. And if you do this on a daily basis, over the course of the next few months, you will have done the bulk of your research. And how will this give you an advantage? So, of course, when we're researching programs, we're trying to determine the list of programs that we're going to apply to. And if we do our research properly, we can have a very tailored list of programs. We can look at our profile, we can match it up to the program criteria, and we can have a well-informed list. If we don't do that, we'll end up with a much larger list. And of course, with that comes the expense associated with applying to a larger number of programs. So one way this benefits you is it saves you clearly some money. Now, another way it benefits you is it allows you to determine your fit with programs. So every program has its own philosophy, its own mission, its own flavor, so to speak, and you're trying to determine what are the unique aspects of a program and how does that mesh with who you are and what you've done. The concept of fit is very important to programs. In one survey, some 70 to 80% of programs looked for fit with a candidate when making interview decisions. So as you're researching programs, you should be looking to see what is the fit between you and the program. And you can document that, keep a record of it, and then you'll be able to use it in different ways. So how can you use fit to help you secure interviews? Well, we mentioned that with the personal statement, you can actually write a program-specific personal statement. Most applicants will write a single personal statement, but some applicants will take a certain number of programs on their program list and actually write a program-specific personal statement. And as programs are moving more and more to a holistic review, that's something that we're pushing programs to do, the personal statement is taking on more importance. And if they can sense that there's a fit from the personal statement, that increases your chances of receiving an interview. You can also use what you learn from a program in other ways. More and more programs are having social media profiles, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or what have you. And if you follow these programs, then they will periodically let you know about events that are taking place at their institutions. They may be hosting applicants for a morning report or some other conference. They may have a Q&A with residents. They may have a meet and greet with the program director. And you will be able to attend those events if you're researching the programs and following their social media pages. And then when you attend those events, you'll be able to get more information about their unique aspects, the things that you've already researched. And you will be able to utilize that information, again, in different ways. It may be that after you apply, you decide to send a letter of interest. Many applicants do that. They send emails after they apply to tell programs of their specific interest. Unfortunately, many of those emails are generic, and it feels like anyone could have written that email for any program. In fact, when we look at emails that we receive at our internal medicine residency program, where I serve as a professor here at the Baylor College of Medicine, most of those emails are very generic. So when someone takes the time to write a thoughtful email that shows fit, that's something that people on the residency selection committee look at in a very different light. So researching programs allows you to do that. And then, of course, when you have interviews, all this work you're doing on the front end to research programs can be used to prepare for the important question, why are you interested in our program? These are just some ways your research can help you. So try to do a little bit every day. That I find to be far more effective than trying to do a lot in a very, very short period of time later in the season. What else should you be working on here in July? Of course, your ERAS descriptions. So those are very important, arguably the most important part of your ERAS application. And so you have experiences that you can list in your residency application, but for every experience you list, you have the opportunity to describe that experience. And so this year, as in previous years, those descriptions are what I call king. Those are things that program directors and other members of the residency selection committee look at very closely. And if they are written very well and they have the content that programs are looking for and they're presented in an appealing way, it will help you secure that interview. So work on your ERS descriptions. They take time to develop, and working on it a little bit here and a little bit there and putting it aside for a little bit allows you to come back to it with a very fresh eye or perspective and helps you see other things that you might like to do to modify it. You, of course, also in July, you want to ask for letters of recommendation. This is important because you don't have full control over your letters of recommendation. You have that over your ERS descriptions, you have that over researching programs, but you also are relying for letters of recommendation on your preceptors and your attendings. And so it's important to engage with your attendings to determine how these letters need to be written. What is it that they need from you? And to make sure that you supply them with that information as early as possible so that they can do their job and end up writing you a letter that is meaningful and one that you deserve. So it's time to ask for letters if you've completed your rotations. If you're in the middle of a rotation, it may not be at time, but it's going to happen very soon. If you're not sure of how to ask for a letter of recommendation in the proper way, in the successful match book that I was referring to, there is a 40-page chapter on letters of recommendation, and it breaks down the whole process into different bits and pieces, including the professional way of asking for a letter of recommendation. Now, along with that, I'm a big believer in working together with your preceptor or attending physician to write the best possible letter. So when I attend on the wards, so I am an internal medicine hospitalist, I work at the Baylor College of Medicine, and everything I do with patient care also involves teaching. So on a typical service, I have a senior resident, 2 internal medicine interns, and usually a 4th-year sub-intern and a couple of 3rd-year medical students. And my learners will need letters for different reasons. But my 3rd and 4th-year students, of course, are going to be looking at the residency match, and they will ask me for a letter. Now, my intent is to write them the best possible letter. I want to do a good job for them. And so I have in my mind many things that I have observed, but I'm not necessarily with them all the time, right? So I round with them for 2 to 3 hours, but there are things that I may not see in the rest of the day. So there are things that I would want to know from them that would help me write the best possible letter. And so I try to ask my students, what are some things that you would like me to highlight? What are some qualities that you demonstrated? What are some patients that you followed? And how were you able to demonstrate those qualities in the context of those patients that you cared for? And so it's a collaborative process. And that is ideally what you want to do. So in the successful match book, as part of that letter of recommendation chapter, you're going to be given some guidance on how to collaborate with your preceptor to help generate the letter that is accurate and deserving of your performance. And so please do refer to that chapter for more details. Now, letters are not the only thing that you don't have full control over. You also have to rely on your medical school to do their part, right? There's some documents that they have to finalize, chiefly your MSPE. And so that takes time. So here we are in July, we still have a lot of time. So this is the time to initiate that process if you haven't done so already, or if you're started it, to make sure that you bring it all the way to the finish line. Again, what you can't control is how long it takes the school to do their thing. So getting everything done earlier is to your advantage. Networking. I get a lot of questions about networking. This is something you should be working on. This is something that every applicant should be working on. It's something that I tell my USMD students at Baylor. It's something that I tell DO students, and it's also something that I tell IMGs. In this day and age, with programs receiving record-breaking numbers of applications, it's really important to have a compelling application, but also to be doing some networking so that your application doesn't get missed. It can be easy for a program to overlook a qualified applicant who's a great fit. And so if you have your network and you're working towards expanding it, that will help get your application noticed. So networking is an important part of what you want to be doing over the next 3 to 4 months. So now let's get into the residency personal statement. This is going to be about what you need to know, what you need to do, and what you need to avoid. But first, we're going to start by talking about the importance of the personal statement. You're going to hear differing opinions. You probably already heard differing opinions. You probably run across people who said, oh, it's not at all important. Other people say it's vital. How important is it? Well, it is an integral part of the residency application. It is absolutely used by programs, many programs, to make decisions about whom to interview. And it is also used by programs in the ranking process. So some of the misconceptions out there is, oh, they don't look at the personal statement until you get to the interview. Not true. If you look at the NRMP program director surveys, you will see some differences from one specialty to another, but you will see that a high percentage of programs in each specialty use the personal statement to make interview decisions, of course, along with the other components of the application. People are also surprised to know that personal statements are used in the ranking process. So they are, perhaps not to the same extent as they are used to make interview decisions, but a substantial percentage of programs use a personal statement as a tool, along with other things, to rank you. So let's talk about getting interviews. And we talked about the importance of that. So this is the survey that I was referring to, 2021. Over 1,000 PDs responded to this survey. They represented over 18 specialties, and they asked these program directors, how important is a personal statement in making interview decisions? They found that over 80% of program directors use the statement in making those interview decisions. They also asked these PDs, how important is it? And they asked them to rate the personal statement on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not very important, 5 being very important. The mean importance rating was 3.9. Now, this survey is a few years old. It is entirely possible that percentages and mean important ratings have changed, especially as we have pushed and pleaded and encouraged residency programs to take a more holistic review of our applicants. Now, we just got through saying that personal statements are also used in the ranking process. Again, going back to the same survey, the 2021 NRMP Program Director Survey, we found out that over 60% of programs use the personal statement in making ranking decisions. And again, these programs were asked to rate the mean importance of the personal statement for ranking, and they gave it a rating of 3.8 on a scale of 1 to 5. Now let's talk about how personal statements are used in the residency selection process. So they are, first of all, used to form an overall impression of you. The statement is a vehicle for you to express yourself in a way that you can't easily do through the other application materials. So of course, your scores, your step exam results, give programs some sense of your academic side, right? Your cognitive abilities. And obviously that's important to programs, but being a great doctor is not just about having the step scores, right? It's all about how you relate to people, the qualities that you have, the feelings that you leave your patients with, your motivations for doing what you're doing. And those are the types of things that are not easy to glean from an application, especially most of its components, but the personal statement allows that to come through. So it gives them an impression of you that's not easily obtained from those other materials. Now, one program director writes, from the personal statement, I want to know if there are any items I couldn't discern from the rest of the ARS application, such as disadvantaged background or a big life event that impacted them in a certain way. So one of the things that you want to do as you're thinking about the content from your personal statement is to ask yourself just a number of questions before you put pen to paper or you start typing away on your laptop. You want to ask yourself some hard questions. And I always recommend to people that you don't skip this important step, because you want to take stock of the things that make you special or unique. And every single one of you has many things that make you special. It's not always apparent at your first glance, but with some introspection and analysis, you will find things that could potentially be great material for your personal statement. So don't skip what I call is the brainstorming phase of this whole process. And for more information on brainstorming, please refer to the extensive chapter in the Successful Match book. It'll give you a series of questions that you can ask yourself to identify some compelling content. How else are personal statements used in the residency selection process? Well, it's a measure of your communication skills. So we know that doctoring requires us to have strong communication skills, both in the written and spoken word. And in the written word, you're going to be doing a lot as a resident. You're going to be writing progress notes, writing admit notes, putting together discharge summaries. And so they will be inspecting your personal statement as well as the rest of your written application for the quality of your writing. And if the writing is quote unquote bad, it may be seen as a marker for poor work ethic or even a lack of effort. One program director said, "I get a sense of the fluidity of their thought and their ability to communicate from the personal statement." There are other things that residency programs look for in personal statements. We talked a moment ago about the fit for a program. Remember that every program has a mission. You will be able to discern that mission from the research that you're doing of the programs. When you're reviewing their websites, pay very close attention to what these programs are looking for. Some programs make it very obvious what they want. For other programs, you have to read between the lines. And sometimes programs are not terribly transparent on their websites, right? We've all seen websites that are very robust, full of great information, and we've seen the opposite, programs that have very little information. Their websites are sparsely populated with information, but we have to, in those situations, use collateral sources of information to get what we need. And again, following their social media, talking to people who are training there or have trained there will give you an idea of what their missions are and how you as an applicant fit with what they're trying to do. So again, try to determine how you fit with the program's mission or vision. And ask yourself, do you have a commitment or an interest that aligns closely with what the program is trying to accomplish? So if you are a dedicated teacher and you have a passion for that, and you've been doing that at different levels, whether it's college, med school, residency, in your home country, and that is what this program finds very important, well, you have a very clear fit with that program. And there are other things, obviously, that can communicate fit. And in some programs, they are very wide-ranging programs that have multiple missions, and you may not fit with one particular aspect of their mission, but you may very well fit with another. So do dig through these residency programs to see how your background fits with what they are trying to do. So personal statements are used to screen. Again, there's a misconception that people won't look at personal statements in the screening phase. And again, as we mentioned earlier, as we're pushing more of these programs to do a holistic review, more and more of these programs are using it in the screening process. One program director wrote that Sometimes, if an applicant is borderline, I'm looking for reasons to invite them. And he was referring to how he utilizes the personal statement in the selection process. Personal statements are also used on the interview day. I know some of my colleagues who sit on our residency selection committee, the first thing they like to read is the personal statement. They use that as a point of departure for asking questions. And they feel like that's the way for them to get to know you. And that can allow them to ask interesting questions, questions that they feel that you would be ready to answer, because of course it's your personal statement. And so they would look to see that you're excited and you're passionate about talking about some of those things. So the personal statement can be used as a stepping stone for the first question that you get asked in an interview. So one program director wrote, I do use the personal statement as help in terms of the questions that I want to ask during the interview. So one very important tip that I tell everybody is, after you submit your application, and actually even before you submit your application, read each line of your personal statement, line by line, and think about what it means, what it says about you, and what you would say to an interviewer if somebody specifically asked you about that particular line. That's how intensively you want to analyze your personal statement before an interview. And we did talk about how personal statements are used in ranking, and a program director said it's one of the components for which people can move up or down. If two applicants were completely equal and one had a really great statement, then we would rank that person higher. So let's talk about what personal statements should include. So we talked about compelling content that makes an applicant stand out. We also want to create a statement that grabs their attention right from the get-go. So these application reviewers, they have a limited time to review applications. And if you captivate them from the start, you're going to have them all the way to the end of your statement. So we often call that a hook of some sort, something that hooks them in, grabs their attention, and then you're more likely to have them with you all the way. One program director said, it often gives me a unique hook about the person that sticks with me. And I sometimes catch myself thinking of that candidate and even referring to them as the one who wrote about blank in their personal statement. I'll tell you a story. We helped prepare a personal statement some years back for an internal medicine residency applicant. And when we mined through his experiences, one of the things that we took note of was some interesting research that he had done as a medical student. And he was studying honey and investigating different effects of honey. But what was most interesting about that is before he could do all that, his preceptor wanted him to handle live bees. And so he essentially had to become a beekeeper. And the one challenge associated with that was that he was deeply scared of bees. And so he had to find a way to overcome his fears, work up the courage, but he ultimately did it and became a beekeeper. And that was a very interesting aspect of his background. And so the statement that we created was about him and how he became a beekeeper and how he initially had those fear of bees, but how he was able to overcome that. And he was able to write in his personal statement about how he takes what he's learned about overcoming his fears and applies it to the patients that he cares for in internal medicine who have different fears as it relates to their health. And by the end of it, he had a very interesting and unique personal statement. And so wherever he went on the interview trail, he was known as the beekeeper. And that was a very strong memory that the people that were reviewing his applications, interviewing him, had of him. So if you can be remembered for something that you've written in your personal statement, of course, that you have to be remembered for the right reasons, that can have a very powerful effect on the way your application is considered and the way that you're rated at an interview. Now, personal statement, of course, should also show how your interests match those of the program and convey fit. They should be well written. We already spoke about that. We talked about how they should be interesting. They should read easily. As I said before, you all have unique characteristics and experiences. Some of you may be listening to this and saying, I can't think of any unique characteristic experiences, but when you go through that chapter in the red book, The Successful Match, it'll help you find those things that are unique. When we speak one-on-one, if you're having a little bit of trouble, I can also help you find those unique characteristics and experiences. And if any of you has what is called a red flag, some area of concern, you really need to think seriously about writing about that in the personal statement. And what I mean by that is if you have a step attempt, if you have an extension in your medical education, perhaps you had a health problem, perhaps you had to take time because there were financial issues, perhaps a family member was sick, perhaps there's a failed clerkship. There's any one of a number of potential areas of concern, but if you have something like that, I would encourage you to speak with me about it so that I can help put it into context for you, because in many cases, you will want to write about that in some way, shape, or form. There's only so many places you can do that. Presently, you can do that in your personal statement, or you could do it in the ERAS application for your impactful experience. So again, if any of you are concerned about that, you're welcome to talk to me. The Pro 1 program director said if there's something in an application that could sink an applicant, add a few lines in the statement, because it's their one chance to provide a narrative. Some students think that I won't address the concern in my application materials because I can address it in an interview, but those students are assuming that they will get the interview. The idea is to explain the circumstances, put it in the proper context, show the reader what it is that happened, what you learned from it, how it shaped you as a person and professional, and make sure that they don't get the impression that it's going to be a problem that follows you into residency. And that can be done in your application. And if it's done properly and it's done well, that can give them the reassurance to go ahead and give you an interview invitation. And that's a far better approach than to, not present it and think I will just address this in an interview, because you might just not get to the interview stage depending upon what that area of concern is. So that's a bit about red flags. Now, what are some mistakes to avoid? Okay, careless errors. We want to read our statements very carefully before we submit the application. If you have careless errors, they will wonder about what kind of care are you going to bring to their program as one of their trainees. So one program director said misspellings, bad grammar, and poor attention to writing detail are a big sign that maybe they don't have the attention to detail to be a good resident.
Hey, Dr. Desai,
Yes.
that first part just cut out a little bit. So would you mind just reiterating what you said just a little bit?
Which part cut out?
Just the beginning of the slide.
Oh, so I was just talking about some mistakes to avoid. And one of the chief mistakes to be careful about is careless errors. And we see that a lot, not just in the personal statement, but in different aspects of the application. And when there are careless errors, it calls into question your attention to detail. And in medicine, regardless of what specialty you want to go into, attention to detail is very much prized. It's crucial for the delivery of high quality patient care. And so if you have careless errors in your application materials, they will wonder about what you will do as a resident in their program. So this program director highlights that by writing about how misspellings, bad grammar, poor attention to writing detail are a big sign that maybe they don't have the attention to detail. Other mistakes to avoid are cliche statements. Okay, sending the wrong statement to a program. Now, how does that happen? So in the AirAsk system, you can upload as many statements as you want. Some applicants, as you all know, do apply to multiple specialties. So they will upload a specialty-specific statement. We have received personal statements written for a different specialty at our program. We're not the only program that receives that. My colleagues at other programs do receive that as well. Sometimes applicants write several statements, one that they send to more academic-oriented programs, and one they send to more community-oriented programs. And sometimes the wrong statement is assigned to the program. And sometimes students will write program-specific personal statements, and sometimes they'll have 4 or 5 lines that's specific to a program, and they'll mention a program by name, and then they will work off of that same templated statement to create another statement for a different program, but forget to change the name of the program in the statement. So there's a lot of ways that this happens, but you have to be extremely diligent and be very, very careful that you don't send the wrong statement to a program. For that matter, this also happens with letters of recommendation. It also happens with letters of interest. We see letters of interest which are addressed to a certain program, but are sent to the wrong program. So obviously, when a mistake like that is made, it can be very difficult to recover from that. So be very, very careful to avoid this very potentially damaging mistake. What are other mistakes to avoid? As we talked about earlier, the personal statement is a chance to give the program information about you that they can't glean from other aspects of the application. This is a sense of who you are that's different from the rest of the application. Now, as we said, you can do a program-specific personal statement. And sometimes you have to if you really want to be considered there. So as you're researching residency program websites, you will see that there are a small percentage of programs that want you to write about something very specific. They may want you to write about why you're interested in training in their state, why you're interested in their program. And if you were to just send a one-size-fits-all statement to that particular program, then you would be communicating to that program that you didn't take a serious enough look at their website to realize that they had some very specific requirements. So obviously, if you didn't do that, you're not going to be considered very highly for their program. So this is another important aspect of your research, is to look for special things that a program may be wanting. So again, you may be compelled to write a program-specific personal statement because a program requests that you do so, or you may also elect to write program-specific personal statements because you feel like that will enhance your chances of getting an interview there. So there are different reasons to do that. Don't feel like you must be compelled to write a program-specific statement for every single program on your list. If you did that, many people apply to 200, 250 programs. It's going to be very hard to do that. But you might choose out of the 200 programs to do that for 10 or 15 programs where you think you have a strong chance or you're specifically interested in those programs. Now, when you're writing your personal statement, there may be stories that you mine from your past experiences that could be viewed negatively, right? In the sense that maybe there is something about that the reader might get turned off. So if you're writing negatively about something or someone, there might be some important meaning attached to that, but you may have to delicately phrase what you're writing. So you have to be a little bit careful if you're introducing any negativity. I'm not saying that there's no place for negativity in a statement, but it has to be done in a very, very careful way. Of course, showing arrogance or overconfidence in one's achievements is a no-no. An equally important no-no is to not toot your horn a little bit. So we see a lot of people who have a lot of great things to say, but when they write it, it comes across very underwhelming. In other words, the language that they use to write about it doesn't do justice to the significance of what they did. So there's a bit of balance here. You're trying not to understate things. At the same time, you're trying not to be arrogant or overconfident. Now, program directors don't always agree on their personal statement or recommendations. It's easy to think that everyone's going to feel the same way about personal statements, and that's not the case. They're very subjective. There's a lot of opinions out there. I promise you that if you showed your personal statement to 5 program directors or 5 members of a residency selection committee, you're going to get very different opinions. So for example, something as seemingly straightforward as your future plans, right? It sounds intuitive for us to just write about our future plans in our personal statement, right? That doesn't sound like a stretch. It doesn't sound like something bad to do. But look at these 2 program directors. Program director 1 wrote, I look to see if people have at least that point in their career, an idea about their career trajectory, any long-term career goals. Program director number 2 says something a bit different. I don't think that the personal statements have to say necessarily what someone's career trajectory is. Many people don't know. I don't think there's anything specific that has to be there. So that's something that seems as straightforward as future plans. Now, what about patient story? Should you include a patient story in your personal statement? Program director 1 said, I always enjoy a patient story just because they're going to be doing a medical career. So I want to make sure that they're connected to patients. Program number 2 had a very different thought. I think over-reliance on a patient story to tell a message may not be very unique. So 2 very different views. What about your interest in internal medicine? Let's say you're an internal medicine residency applicant, right? It seems straightforward to express your interest in internal medicine and present to the residency program what your motivation is for pursuing a career in the specialty. Program director 1 said something that references why you're choosing this specialty, because there's nowhere else really in the application to do that. So that this program director is a proponent for including why you are interested in internal medicine. Program director number 2 writes, I often just skip over those short paragraphs or the short statements about why I'm interested in internal medicine or how I fell in love with internal medicine. I find those less helpful because you're applying to internal medicine. Of course you want to do internal medicine. So some very, very differing views that may surprise you. But remember, what you're trying to do in these personal statements is appeal to a wide range of programs. There is nothing inherently wrong about writing about why you're interested in internal medicine or what your future plans are. Does that mean that every single PD or every single application reviewer wants to see that or puts equal value on every aspect of those components? No. But again, you're trying to appeal to a wide range. Now, this also is very helpful as you are bringing people into your confidence and sharing your personal statement with them to get their feedback. My personal opinion is that when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, and you have a lot of people that you're sending your personal statement to, the chances of you being tortured by the feedback is going to be very high, because you're going to get, if you send this to 10 different people, 10 probably very different opinions, okay? It's far better, in my experience, to keep your circle very tight. Find 3 people that you truly trust and respect, ideally people who have experience reviewing personal statements, people who have sat on residency selection committees, as some attendings and preceptors have done. Those are the types of people that you ideally want to get input from. Of course, you have a trusted confidant in your life. It could be a family member. Of course, you're going to share it with them, but you have to decide who is going to carry more weight in this process, because they are going to have very divergent views in many cases. Okay. Now, let's say that you share this with, you have the luxury of knowing 5 different program directors. Of course, not everybody has that luxury, but let's say you did, and you got 5 different opinions and 5 different strong opinions. And let's say that you decided to go with one of those 5 opinions, and you send that personal statement out to all the programs. Well, 4 of those 5 PDs may not be satisfied and may look at it and say, oh, he really didn't take my advice to heart. So this is where having a lot of cooks in the kitchen can potentially be problematic. So think about a couple of people that you truly trust. Keep that circle tight. It will save you a lot of headache and hassles and mental torture as you go through this process. For more information about personal statements, the Successful Matchbook that we talked about with an extensive chapter on personal statements with not just my opinions, but the evidence from the literature on residency selection to guide your decisions regarding content. You'll have more PD quotes. You'll also have sample statements that are considered by a range of decision makers to be statements that resonate with them. There, as we said before, blog posts on the personal statement at thesuccessfulmatch.com, and then podcast episodes about the personal statement on our Success in Medicine podcast. And now to your questions. All right, so one question that we received is, what are the chances to match as a US IMG with step 2 score of 230? I have a graduation date of 2022, I have 4 LORs, I'm currently working as a medical assistant in the DC area. So the thing with chances of matching, it's a very complex equation, right? There's a lot that goes into matching, and it's very hard to say what anyone's chances of matching are from a limited amount of information. Because while we know what the step 2 score is, while we know what the graduation date is, and we do know that there are 4 LORs, there's a lot we don't know. We don't know what these LORs are. We don't know what specialty this person is going into. We don't know the content of the LORs. We don't know the quality of the residency application, the appeal of the personal statement. So it becomes very, very hard. If we're just looking at a step 2 score, you can access that data from the NRMP documents, charting outcomes in the match. Generally at a score of 230, if you look at the percentages, it's somewhere around 60% for a US IMG. Now, that percentage could go much higher if the LORs are particularly strong, because the LORs are the second most important factor in the residency selection process. But without knowing everything else, it's hard to give a strong estimate of one's chances. But I think there are some very good things with this limited amount of information that we have that would suggest that the chances are good. The next question, is the step 3 score important for old grads or just having passed the exam enough? So prior to step 1 going pass fail, we would recommend that people consider taking the step 3 exam at the time right before applying if there were 2 situations. One was if they had taken step 1 and 2 and had a history of low scores or multiple attempts, then taking step 3 would be something that would be very important to do, preferably before you apply. The other reason to take step 3 would be if you are a visa requiring applicant, you wanted to be considered for an H-1B visa. Once step 1 became pass fail, we began to speculate on how residency selection criteria would change. And there was some thought that maybe step 3 would become more important in the process because it would still be a numerical score. And so we don't have firm data about this. We don't have a great study that's asked program directors, how important is step 3 in the era of step 1 being pass fail. We do have some anecdotal reports where some program directors have said they would like to see a step 3 score. What I will say is, again, if you have low scores or temps, I think it's very important to take that exam, preferably before you apply, but above all, to take it only when you're ready. So if you're gearing up to taking it before you apply, and physically, mentally, emotionally, you don't feel quite right, or you're not tracking to get the score that you want, or there's a risk that you may not pass the exam, then it's not a good idea to rush the exam. It's better to push it back and take it after you apply. Because not doing well in step 3, and especially if you don't pass it, is going to present a whole set of new challenges. So the step 3 score can be important for all applicants, depending upon their situation, not just for old grads. Now, as far as the score itself, is it okay to just pass it? So a lot depends on what your step 2 score is. So if you have a very high step 2 score, or you have a very competitive step 2 score, it may not be that important to achieve a very high step 3 score. If you have a low step 2 score or a history of attempts on step 1 or step 2, then achieving a higher score in step 3 is to your advantage, because you can present to the program the evidence that shows that you have looked at your past performance, identified what was holding you back, and now you have remedied that. And proof of that is now coming through your step 3 score, which is significantly higher than your past step 1 and step 2 results. Now, what I would also say is that just passing it can be a little problematic at some programs, because there is some evidence that just passing step 3, especially if you have a history of low scores, I'm not talking about the person who has very high scores and just passed step 3, but if you have a history of very, very low scores, just passing it could still show them that you might be at risk for future problems with the board certification exam, right? At the end of any residency, you're going to have to take a board certification exam, and the pass rates for each residency class is made public. And programs like to use that as a marketing technique, right? So if you have 100% board passing rate, applicants look at that, and they might look at it as a marker of the quality of the residency program. So there are reasons why programs look carefully at these step exam scores, because they do want to make sure that if you have low scores, that you will eventually be able to pass the board certification exam. So if anyone has concerns specifically about themselves with their step history, please do talk to me about it. You will have access to me directly. Some of you already have it. Some of you who are new rotators will have it soon. So you can always just reach out and talk to me about anything that concerns you. Next question: to what extent, if at all, does a home country residency hold merit when a program director were to consider between candidates? Home country residency is well regarded by residency program directors, because remember what programs are looking for. Above all, they are looking for people who are going to be clinically capable. They want to go home at night knowing that their patients in your hands are in good hands. And so if you have done a residency with advanced training, that generally means that you have acquired skills that are going to be transferable to a US-based residency program. And usually that means that they might be able to sleep better at night when you're on call. Now, that being said, there are some concerns that people have with people who've done home country residencies. And that has to do with how you're going to relate to residents in your program that don't have the same level of training. So if you're somebody who has completed a residency in your country, and now you have matriculated into a residency program and you're a PGY1, and your upper level resident on the ward has far less experience than you, are you going to relate well to that person? And that is something that does happen in residency programs, where there sometimes are clashes between residents. And so for those of you who finished a home country residency or have other types of advanced training, you want to always appear what I would call coachable and a team player through your application materials and certainly at the time of the residency interview. So as far as what would be a good way of presenting this experience, while coming across as someone who values the residency experience equally or more, it's by stating in your application that you have done things in your residency that you will encounter in your US-based residency, but being humble enough to indicate that there's still a lot that you have to learn and that you're somebody who's hungry to learn all of that and is definitely willing to do that as a team player working with people of different backgrounds and different levels. Next question. What do you recommend to make the most of the AAFP conference coming up in August as a family medicine applicant? For those of you who are not familiar with the AAFP, it's American Academy of Family Practice. Every July and August, they have a conference that's called the National Conference for Family Medicine Residents and Students. It's held in Kansas City. It's a great conference if you're going into family medicine. What makes it great are many things, but one thing that's the highlight of that conference is their exhibit hall. In their exhibit hall, they have many residency programs with booths. And these booths are staffed by key personnel at these respective programs that could include the program director, the associate program director, key faculty, chief residents, and you can meet those people at the conference. It's a great way to network, but you have to know how to network. So let me give you some tips for AAFP, but this also applies to any conference that you guys go to in any specialty. So before you go to the AAFP conference, go to their website for the conference, pull up the exhibitor map, and you'll be able to see every single program that has a booth there. Cross-reference that with your list of IMG-friendly programs in family medicine. So determine which of the programs in the exhibit hall are IMG-friendly, and determine which of them are IMG-friendly most to your situation as an applicant. In other words, which program's criteria matches your profile most closely. That will give you a shorter list. Those are the programs you want to prioritize in the exhibit hall. Now, once you have the short list, you need to go to each program's website and find several unique things or interesting things about those programs and think about how those unique aspects of the program relate to you as an individual and a professional. How does that mesh with you? Why does that make you interested in them? Then what you want to do is record this, put it in your phone, make an index card, find a way to record this information. And then when the exhibit hall opens, have a plan in place to decide which programs you're going to visit. I would recommend going to the most friendly programs for your situation first, preferably programs that are further in the back of the exhibit hall initially, because usually people will start with the programs that are at the front of the entrance, and go talk to the ones in the middle or the back because nobody will be there, and then work your way through the programs on your list. Before you go to the booth, review your index card or your phone for the key points that you've made about the program, and go in there and talk to whoever's there, express your interest, be well-mannered, and work into the conversation those things that you find interesting about the program. What you will find is that will allow you to develop a strong connection with that particular person you're talking to. Most applicants who do this don't come that prepared. So they go into the booths just sort of gathering information, but not knowing that much about a program. But if you do some of this advanced work, you will really be remembered. Don't leave the booth without getting the contact information of the person or people that you interacted with, and follow up your conversation after the conference with an email. So you open up a line of communication with that particular individual. In your email, make sure that you reference something specific that you talked about during your conversation. Now you have an open line of communication with potentially a program director or a faculty member or chief resident. And then when you apply, you'll be able to reach out to that particular person, expressing your interest in their program, reminding them that you are somebody who is sincerely and deeply interested in them, and that's going to help them flag your application for a closer review. So those are some key points to take into account as you're preparing for the AAFP conference, but all of this applies to any conference, regardless of whether you're going for internal medicine, general surgery, anesthesia, or anything else. Next question, how do I select geographic preference? You can identify up to 3 geographic preferences. There are 9 geographic regions that you can select from. They are not all the same. So depending upon what your specialty is, one approach to selecting your geographic preferences, depending upon your flexibility, some IMGs are restricted in where they want to match. So they may only identify a certain geographic region. Maybe their significant other has a job that they can't leave. So we do have situations where the flexibility isn't there. But assuming you have flexibility for geographic regions, you want to take a look at all the IMG-friendly programs and categorize them by regions. You want to also categorize the regions by the number of programs that are IMG friendly to your specific situation. Once you get those numbers, you'll be able to see where most of your programs lie. You may find out that 4 or 5 of the regions, there's hardly any programs that fit your profile, which will make your selection of geographic preferences much easier. So again, if any of you have specific questions related to your situation as it pertains to geographic preferences, we can discuss that one-on-one. If I'm able to request a previous LOR writer to re-upload his or her letter, what can I suggest that they include in the letter as updates to make it stronger if they agree to it? So this depends on a lot of factors. So first of all, it depends on whether you've seen the letter. So if you've seen the letter or you have access to the letter, it's time now to take stock of how good that letter is. Is it truly a strong letter? You will know that by reading the 40-page chapter on letters of recommendation in the Successful Matchbook. It gives you an inside look into how program directors assess letters. So you can analyze your letters based on that information. And if it's strong, great. If it's not strong and your letter writer is open to a collaborative approach, then there may be things that you can suggest to him or her that would make the letter stronger. Now, if you were to do that, you have to be very delicate in your approach. You need to be careful in how you decide to do this, because you don't want to give the letter writer this idea that you're not happy with the work that they've done. So you might want to phrase it in some way that sounds like this. You know, Dr. Smith, I wanted to thank you so much for your support of my residency application. Your letter of recommendation means so much to me. You know, these letters of recommendation are getting more and more important. I was recently talking to my advisor, and he mentioned that these letters are now the second most important criteria in the residency selection process, right after the USMLE Step 2 exam. And so some of the advice that I've received from my advisor, as well as some of the program directors during these meet and greets that I've been attending, is that they find it helpful if a letter writer can comment on a few things specifically. And I was wondering, since you know me and my work very, very well from our time together, do you feel comfortable just adding a few more points to this letter that you've already written? So something delicate like that can help you get this done. Now, again, this really just depends on how strong that letter is, whether you have access to it. It also means that you have to take an honest look at how you performed in that rotation. What was the feedback that you got when you rotated there? If this was your first U.S. clinical experience, perhaps your performance wasn't at an equal level to your third U.S. clinical experience. Well, if that's the case, should you have the flexibility to be here in the U.S. and you have a little bit of time, maybe you reach out to the LOR writer and you say, hey, Dr. Jones, would it be okay with you if I came and saw some patients with you for about a week? And Dr. Jones might say, absolutely, come on over, hang out with me for a week. And now, because you're more seasoned, because you have so much more US clinical experience than you did when you first rotated with that person, they would see a much different version of you, right? I remember when I was a medical student, my first clinical experience, and I'm somebody who born and raised here, I had a rough time. I wasn't performing the same way in my first clinical experience as I did in my third clinical experience. So these are some things to take into account. And of course, there's many other variables as well. So again, for this specific questioner, if you want to talk to me one-on-one, I'm happy to provide more specific context. Okay, another applicant, rotator, had a question about an interruption in his medical school. His medical school was interrupted for 8 years because of health problems. I resumed my studies 2 years ago. I'll be graduating next year. The question is, can that harm my CV and my application? Because my years of education and the application will be 16 years in total. I'm afraid that the interruption will hurt my application a lot. I know you're worried. Good news is we have seen a lot of people with interruptions in their medical school education of varying lengths overcome that. We have seen people with 11 years of health problems, 13 years of medical school education that occurred because they had family health or financial problems. So there's different things that can happen in medical school. I myself was fortunate. I went through medical school without having any problems with my personal health or any problems with my family's health. But we can't control when things happen to us, right? We can get sick at any point. And if it happens, we have to deal with that. But the good news is it can be overcome, again, with the way that you present it. If you present it in such a way that people can understand what it is that happened, and you can show the growth that you've had as a person, as a professional from that, and how that's shaped you into being a certain type of practitioner with the patients you care for, you may be able to show these programs that you're bringing something very valuable to them that's going to add to the diversity of their class. So again, for this specific individual, if you want to talk to me one-on-one, we can talk about your situation. How do you navigate being out of medical school for 10 years? So again, this all depends on what you've been doing over the 10 years. If you have significant gaps, they would need to be addressed in a certain way. If you haven't had significant gaps, you have to determine how to present the experiences that you've been involved in over the last 10 years in a way that resonates with programs. Many of the things that we do after medical school develop qualities and skills that are transferable to residency training. And so that can be something that can be highlighted through the entirety of your application. What is the value of step 3 before the MAT cycle? That's something that we did address before. Are there any resources you could recommend on how to write a good LOR in case the preceptors ask us to draft our own LORs? Absolutely. So the letter of recommendation chapter in the Successful Match book is a great place to start. Highly recommended. Again, gives you an eye-opening look into what program directors are looking for in terms of content of these letters. And then if you write to us, we can also share with you links to other credible sources of information. So we're here to help you with these types of things. And then we have how to network and increase the chances of matching. Very big question. I believe every applicant needs to make this an important part of their overall strategy and to carve out a little time to do this. Networking for this purpose means you're trying to meet people who have ties to different residency programs, preferably IMG-friendly programs where your profile fits their criteria. And the idea is by getting to know people who have ties to the program, that these people, after they get to know you, would advocate for you. So as we said earlier in this webinar, these programs get so many applications that it can be easy to overlook qualified applicants. And so having someone in your network that can put in a good word for you can help your application get noticed. And then if you've done your part to create a compelling application, the two together is going to really help you secure that interview. So it's all about looking for people who have ties and reaching out to them. Now, when you reach out to them, you cannot right off the bat ask them to advocate for you. This is probably the most common mistake and the mistake that ruins everything. If you ask for too much too soon, chances are nothing is going to happen, or rarely is something good going to happen. You have to reach out to these people from an information gathering mode so that you start to develop a relationship. They have to hear you. They have to talk to you. They have to get a sense for who you are as a person. They have to like you, right? You're all very likable people. They just don't know enough about you yet to get behind you. So the idea is when you connect with these people, you have to convert the email or the social media message into a phone call or a video call, something that's more personal. And then the relationship really starts to build. And go in as an information gatherer and think about how to connect with that person and how to build a relationship over time. We still have 3-4 months of solid networking that can increase our chances of matching. But the key is, no matter how much the inside of you wants to ask, hey, can you recommend me? Don't do that until the relationship has been built up a little bit. You will find that it's far more beneficial to you if you use that approach. What kind of publications can one work on if data collection isn't possible? For example, if one is on a rotation in the US, are literature reviews an option? Absolutely, literature reviews are an option. Case reports, case series, any research projects that are going on, even if it doesn't lead to publication, can be very valuable for your application. There's a belief that only publications and presentations hold value. Not true. If you look at the NRMP data, you will see that a substantial number of people match every year without publications and presentations. You can match without this. It can be great, though, if you can get involved in some research projects for a variety of reasons. And so if there's something going on at the rotation, at the hospital, you can get involved. If there isn't anything going on, you have an idea, you can get involved. We have a number of students in our program who've done case reports, case series, narrative pieces, reviews. Some people have spent time in the clinical research department of their preceptor's practice, taking part in clinical research, especially clinical trials, and they were able to write about the different aspects of the clinical trial process that they've become familiar with. So not everything has to lead to a publication. It sure would be nice if we can get there, but research projects themselves also hold quite a bit of value. What are the chances of matching in general surgery with 3 months of USCE? Again, very hard to tell you what the chances are because there's so much more to it than just knowing that someone has done 3 months of USCE. Have we had people in our program who've done 3 months with us and matched into general surgery? Absolutely. That has happened many times before. It can be done. And the whole key, again, is strengthening every aspect of your application. Having quality USCE, strong letters of recommendation. STEP scores are very important to general surgery programs. Leadership is very important to general surgery programs. Again, whoever this individual is, I'm more than happy to talk specifically about general surgery as it relates to your situation, and I'm happy to do that. How to be a competitive applicant as an IMG with a failed step 1? Should I dual apply for FM and OB, or is it better to dual apply with a prelim year in surgery and OB? So with a failed step exam, you'll often hear, oh my goodness, it's going to be next to impossible for someone to match because you've had a failed tap. Not true. We have tremendous history of applicants who have had an attempt and who have matched into a variety of specialties. Is it easy? No. Is it doable? Yes. Does it require a lot of hard work and effort? Yes. Does it require a special strategy? 100%. Special strategy is required. It means that you have to strengthen everything else that you can. It means you have to, if you haven't taken the other step exams, diagnose what the problem is with the step 1 result so that you can show your true colors on step 2 and step 3. It means doing US clinical experience and sometimes doing much more US clinical experience than someone who may not have failed step 1. So strengthening your US clinical experience profile helps a lot if you have a history of an attempt or low scores. And dual applying can help as well. So in the case of family medicine and OB, family medicine as a specialty is much more receptive to attempts than OB is. And family medicine, a significant part of family medicine training is women's health. And so people who are interested in OB may find satisfaction in family medicine. In addition, people who go into family medicine can do a fellowship specifically in obstetrics or women's health following their family medicine residency. So there's different ways to practice aspects of what you want to practice with respect to patient care with different specialties. Again, with this question, this individual is more than welcome to reach out to me directly. And that brings us to the end. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Alyssa, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. So for those of you who left questions in the chat, unfortunately, we don't have time, but I do highly, highly recommend you reach out to any of us on our team, including Dr. Desai. We'd be happy to answer those questions in detail with you. So please reach out to us. So with that said, I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined us tonight and who submitted questions on our Google form. We hope that the webinar was beneficial for you and that it addressed any of your questions or concerns that you have for the upcoming match. We'd love to hear your feedback. Let us know if you guys enjoyed the webinar tonight or if there's any topics in the future that you want us to talk about. I did also just briefly want to reiterate that we encourage and welcome each of you to reach out to our team, whether it's to discuss your rotation or if it's to discuss guidance. We're more than happy to help, and we want to help you guys reach your goals. So please feel free to reach out to any of us privately. You can reach us via email at info@md2bconnect.com. And you can also reach out to Dr. Desai. If you don't have his phone number yet, you will at some point during your rotation. And I think we will also try to incorporate the questions that we received tonight in our upcoming webinars so that we can answer some of those. So with that said, thank you once again for joining, and I will send it over to Dr. Desai for some final words.
Thank you, Alyssa. We did have some great questions today. So sorry that if we didn't get to your question, we want to address your questions. So as Alyssa said, reach out to us directly. That's what our program is all about. It's giving you the opportunity to experience a great rotation. But more than that, it's about providing mentorship, providing guidance, being there for you, making sure you never feel like you're alone in this process. And so that means that you have a direct line to all of us, including myself, not just during this rotation, but well after this rotation ends. I'd love to hear from you, hear about what's going on, hear about things you're excited about doing, learn about your doubts, get on a call with you to address your concerns. That isn't something that just takes place during a rotation. We're available to you throughout this process. We want to know that you're making progress. We believe in you and we want to support you every step of the way. So we thank you today for joining us, and I look forward to keeping up with all of you here in the coming days to weeks. So again, have a great 4th of July.
Yeah, everybody have a great 4th of July, and thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in next month's webinar, hopefully.
All the best. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Have a great night.